Hi, this is Bunton with your Visual Functional Mathematics at Level 2, Sections 1 on Numbers. This lesson is Lesson 3 and the topic is Fractions. You'll observe that each of my lessons have been presented with a little visual symbol that is meant to reinforce the topic of that lesson and justify why I call my lessons Visual Functional Mathematics. This week's lesson is on fraction and is represented by an image of part of the fraction world, which I'll talk about at the end of the lessons. So let's get on with fractions. Today's lesson is presented in two sessions. You got session 1 and session 2. The overall lesson covers the following. Understand that fraction is part of a whole. You will identify equivalent fractions, be able to write fractions in their simplest forms. You'll be able to express one number as a fraction of another. You will know what mixed fractions are and be able to compare fractions. You will add and subtract fractions and mixed numbers. You'll be able to use fractions with a calculator, and you'll be able to find fractions of something. The keywords you should be able to use fluently and understand clearly are parts, whole, equivalent fractions, mixed numbers, divide, multiply, numerator, and denominators. Numerator and denominator seems to be old words now, but that's what I was taught, and it makes clear sense to me, really, to call things by their proper names. So you can either call them numerator or top numbers, and denominators as bottom numbers of a fraction, which is always made up of two parts. So let's get on with session 1 on fraction. In this session, you will understand that fraction is part of a whole. You will identify equivalent fractions. You will be able to write fractions in their simplest form, and you will express one number as a fraction of another. The reason why I have divided the lesson into two parts is simply because it's unusually longer than my usual lessons, which has a maximum of about 25 minutes really. And fraction is not an easy topic, so you'll be able to digest it, and you've got a week to work on it. And even more importantly is the fact that you've got more than the usual number of practice questions to deal with. We've got, I think, 6 or 7 practice questions which you have to deal with. So take your time, work diligently, and you'll be fine. What are fractions? Fractions show parts of things. If something is divided up into equal parts, you can show it as a fraction. There are 2 bits to every fraction. The bottom number, which I call the denominator, shows how many parts there are in total. The top number, which I call the numerator, shows how many parts we're talking about. An improper fraction is a fraction which has a top number that is bigger than the bottom number. For example, 6/5 or 4/3. They are greater than 1. In other words, they are greater than a whole. You treat improper fractions in just the same way as normal fractions. Equivalent fractions. Equivalent fractions are equal in size, but the numbers on the top and bottom are different. Look at this diagram in front of you. You'll see that the same sized rectangles are split into 5 and 10 sections. The first one is 2/5, And then the second one is 4/10, if you look at the shaded area. The same area is shaded in each shape, which shows 2/5 and 4/10, and it shows that they are equivalent. To get from one fraction to an equivalent one, multiply or divide the top and the bottom by the same number. Example, what fraction is equivalent to 4/9 but has 27 on the bottom or the denominator? Answer, to get from 9 to 27 you multiply by 3. You need to multiply 4 by 3 and your answer will be 4 times 3, 12, and of course 9 times 3 is 27. So your answer will be 12/27. Writing fractions in their simplest forms. Let's look at this. If the top and bottom of the fraction are both multiples of the same number, then the fraction can be simplified using equivalent fractions. A fraction is in its simplest form if the numbers on the top and the bottom are as small as possible. They can be divided by the same number to give whole numbers. Example 1. Fractions in their simplest forms. Write the fraction 10/15 in its simplest form. Both 10 and 15 are divisible by 5. So divide the top and bottom of the fraction by 5 and you will have 2/3, as you can see at the bottom there. Example 2. Write the fraction 36/144 in its simplest form. Both 36 and 144 are divisible by 12. So divide the top and the bottom of the fraction by 12. Talking about 12, you remember I have advised you to learn up to 12 times table. So the more multiplication table you learn, the easier you'll find some of these fractions and other forms of calculation. Okay? So 36 divided by 12 is 3, and 144 divided by 12 is 12. But if you look at 3/12, they are still divisible by 3. So 3 divided by 3 is 1, and 12 divided by 3 is 4. So your final answer is 36/144 is equivalent to 1/4. Talking about that, if you're more comfortable with numbers, you can straight divide 36 by 36, 144, and you will get 1/4. Expressing one number as a fraction of another. To write one number as a fraction of another, you write the first number as the top part of the fraction and the second number as the bottom part. You will then need to simplify the fraction as we did for equivalent fractions. Example, what is 30 as a fraction of 75? Write your answer in its simplest form. Remember, a fraction is simply a division sum. So, write the first number on the top and the second number on the bottom. And then you find a factor that will divide them to their simplest forms. So both 30 and 75 can be divided by 5. So the fractions can be simplified. And 30 divided by 5 is 6. 75 divided by 5 is 15. So you have 6/15. But if you look at that, that can further be divided by 3, each top and bottom number. So 6 divided by 3 is 2, and 15 divided by 3 is 5. So you have 2/5. 30 as a fraction of 75 is 2/5. Let's look at some practice questions. Set 1. You have first of all questions 1 to 5. Always read your questions carefully and note that some of these questions are not to be done with calculators. You have to learn to do your calculations mentally. Question 1. 13 people take the driving tests on the same day. 9 of them passed. What fraction of people didn't pass? Read question 1 carefully. There's a catch. What fraction of people didn't pass? Question 2. What numbers should go in the box so that dash over 81 is equivalent to 5/9? Question 3. What number should go in the box so that dash over 3 is equivalent to 28/12? Question 4. Write these fractions in their simplest form. A. 7/42. B. 75/150th. C. 56/72. And D. 324/72. Question 5. Write these numbers as a fraction of 120. Simplify your answers. A. 24. B. 75. C. 90. D. 192. Let's see the answers. But before we do, let's look at questions 6 and 7. Question 6. In the month before a show, Mia's music teacher recommended that she should spend 68 hours practicing. Mia actually practiced for 60 hours in the month before the show. That sounds familiar, but maybe she is very, very clever. Write how long Mia actually practiced as a fraction of what her teacher recommended. Give your answer in its simplest form. Question 7. Last year, Jeremy had 2 jobs. One as a waiter, and he earned £90 per weekend for 26 weeks. As a climbing instructor, he earned £720 a week for 13 weeks. What fraction of his total income was from being a waiter? Give your answer in its simplest form. You need to be careful. These questions are not as straightforward as you might think. Think very carefully because you're looking at 2 factors which you have to combine. But most importantly, you have to focus on one, which is based on the question. These are your answers. Questions 1, 2, 3. Question 4, A, B, C, D. Question 5, A, B, C, D. And question 6 and 7. Check your answers. If you got all of them right, that's fantastic. Congratulations. Pat yourself on the back. It's always good to celebrate when you got something right. If you didn't, don't worry. Just make sure you do your corrections. And most importantly, you find out where you went wrong. It's okay to make mistakes. Let's look at session 2 now. You will know what mixed fractions are and be able to compare fractions. You will be able to add and subtract fractions and mixed numbers. You will be able to use fraction with a calculator, and you'll be able to find fractions of something. Mixed numbers. What are mixed numbers? Mixed numbers are when you have a whole number part and a fraction part all together to form one number. As you can see on the right, you have 1 1/4 or 1 1/4, and then you have 2 3/5. To convert a number into mixed fraction, you first need to find the new top number. Multiply the whole number part by the bottom number of the fraction part. In other words, multiply the whole number by the denominator. and add this to the top number, the numerator of the fraction part, to get the new top number. The bottom number always stays the same. Example: what fraction is equal to 4 7/12? 4 7/12 is a mixed number, remember that. Find the new top number. Multiply the whole number part by the bottom number of the fraction. Then add this to the top number. 4 times 12 is 48. So the new top number is 48 plus 7, which is 55. Now you put that on top of the 12 and you will have 55/12 as a fraction. We used to call it top-heavy fraction. To convert from a fraction to a mixed number, you need to divide the top number by the bottom number. You should do this without a calculator so you get a reminder. Remember, that is important. Calculators give us numbers in results in decimals. That's how it operates. So if you use a calculator, you will have a decimal as your remainder. Read the following 5 points carefully and digest them. Fractions are just numbers, so they can be put in order of sizes. Remember lesson 1 on numbers. Look at the bottom numbers. If they're the same, then you can just order the fractions by looking at the top numbers. 3. If the bottom numbers are different, you'll need to use equivalent fractions. Turn the fractions into equivalent fractions with the same bottom number. You know how to do that now. Then you can use the top numbers to order them. And the final point, if you have to compare mixed numbers and improper fractions, convert the mixed numbers into fractions first. You multiply the denominator by the whole number, and then you add the top number, which is the numerator. Example of comparing fractions. Which is bigger, 5/4 or 1/3/7? You have 4 points to look at here. Change the mixed number into a fraction. So 1 times 7 is 7. So the new top number is 7 plus 3, which is 10. So 1/3/7 as a fraction is 10/7. The bottom numbers are different, so you need to find equivalent fractions. 4 times 7 is 28. So multiply the top and bottom number of each fraction to get 28 on the bottom. 5 times 7 is 35. 4 times 7 is 28. 10 times 4 is 40. 7 times 4 is 28. Now you have fractions with the same denominator, the same bottom number. You can now compare your fractions. 40 is bigger than 35, so 1/3/7 is bigger than 5/4. Practice question set 3. Don't forget I told you at the beginning that you're going to have more practice set questions. Question 1. Which fraction is larger, 3/4 or 30/36? Question 2. Put the following fractions in order from smallest to largest. 120 4/100ths, 2/5, and 5/20, for A. B. 3/20, 6/24, and 9/54. And 3. Mike and Leo are running laps of a field. Mike has run 5 7/10 laps and Leo has run 133 25th laps. Who has run the furthest? And these are your solutions. Look at them carefully. Try to understand how to compare them before you put them in order. Adding and subtracting mixed fractions. You can only add and subtract fractions if the bottom numbers are the same. To do this, you need to find a common factor so that all the bottom numbers can be the same. In my days, we used to call it the lowest common factor, the LCM. But it has been made easier with functional mathematics. So here goes. If the bottom numbers are not the same, you will need to use equivalent fractions. Turn the fractions into equivalent fractions with the same number on the bottom, the same denominator. Then you just add or subtract the top numbers. The bottom numbers stay the same. Here is an example. What is 3/10 plus 3/5 minus half? Write your numbers in its simplest form. 1. The bottom numbers are not the same, so you need to convert them to equivalent fractions to find fractions with the same bottom number. Here goes. 5 times 2 is 10, so 3 times 2 is 8, and 5 times 2 is 10. So you have 6/10, and then the second bit, 2 times 5 is equal to 10, so 1 times 5 is 5, and 2 times 5 is 10. And the third bit, add and subtract the top numbers. The bottom numbers stay the same. So you have 3/10, which we have already at the start. Then we have the converted fractions, 6/10 minus 5/10. So 3/10 plus 6/10 minus 5/10 is equal to 4/10. By the way, what you see there in the middle, 3 plus 6 minus 5 over 10 is the way we used to do it when we were at school. We have one line and then you find the lowest common multiple, which is 10, and then you just put all the numbers at the top and subtract them. And then 3, convert your answer into its simplest form, because 4/10 can be converted into its simplest form by dividing both top and bottom numbers by 2. And then you'll have 2/5. Adding and subtracting mixed numbers. To add or subtract mixed numbers, first split up the whole number and fraction parts. Add or subtract the two parts separately and then add them back together. If the fraction part calculation gives an improper fraction, you will need to change it to a mixed number and add the whole number parts to the others. This is what we mean. Example 1. What is 2 3/4 plus 1 3/8? Split up the whole number fraction parts. 2 3/4 plus 1 3/8 is equal to 2 plus 1, that's the two whole numbers, and then plus the fraction bits, 3/4 plus 3/8. Add up each part. So 2 plus 1 is 3, the whole numbers, and then 3/4 plus 3/8 is equal to 6/8 plus 3/8, which is equal to 9/8, which is equal to 1/1/8. Don't forget to convert between improper fractions and mixed fractions when you have your answer, because you already have 3, and then you have your answer of the calculation of the fractions as 1/1/8. So 1 and 3 is equal to 4 plus 1/8. So your answer is 4/1/8. You can only get this right when you continue to practice. If you don't practice, you will struggle. And this is why you have more practice questions now than you've ever had before. Adding and subtracting mixed numbers. Example 2. What is 4 2/5 minus 2 1/10? First of all, split the whole number and fraction parts. So 4 minus 2 plus the fraction bit, 2/5 minus 1/10. So don't forget, you've already subtracted the whole numbers from each other. 2. Subtract each part. 4 minus 2 is 2, and you have 2 fifths minus 1/10, which is equal to 4/10 minus 1/10, which is equal to 3/10. How did you get 4/10? Remember, you want to make them to equivalent fractions. So you multiply 2 by 2 and then 5 by 2 so that they will have the same common numbers at the bottom. Put the two parts back together. So the whole number 2 plus the fraction 3/10 is equal to 2 3/10. Be careful when you're subtracting. You need to subtract the different parts. But when you're putting the two parts back, you need to add them again. Practice question set 4. What is 1/4 plus 2 fifths? What is 4 fifths minus 3/10? Question 3. What is 5/3 plus 3/7? 4. What is 7/8 minus 3/5? 5. What is 1/2 plus 2 5/6? 6. What is 4 5/8 minus 2 1/4? And then for question 7, Jasper is going on holiday. The airline says he can take a maximum of 22 kilograms of luggage. His main suitcase weighs 18¾ kilogram and his carry-on bag weighs 2 3/8 kilogram, and he also has another small bag that weighs 4 fifths of kilogram. Will you be able to take all of his bags into the plane? Explain your answers. You know what to do for that one. And those are your answers. Questions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And question 7, which is the exam type question, the answer is yes. Why? Because he has 21/37/40 kilogram, and I think the maximum he can take is 21. It is below the limit. Using fractions with a calculator. 3/4 is just another way of writing 3 divided by 4. I think I've told you that before, that a fraction is simply a division sum. If your calculator doesn't have a fraction button, you can still use it to turn fractions into decimals by dividing. Once you've finished any calculation, don't forget to give your answer as a fraction again. Finally, make sure you put the fraction in its simplest form. Using the calculator, you need to be always conscious of the fact that you're doing a fraction sum. So once you've done your calculation, you have to convert again into fractions. Example, calculate 201 2/68 minus 28/40. Convert the fractions into decimals. As you can see at the bottom, 201 divided by 268 is equal to 0.75. And then 28 divided by 40 is equal to 0.7. Step 2, you do your calculations. 0.75 minus 0.7 is equal to 0.05. Don't forget your decimal places. 2 decimal places is over 100. So finally, convert the decimals back to a fraction and simplify. So 0.05 is 5 over 100. Both 5 and 100 are divisible by 5, so just bring it to its lowest form and you'll have 1/20th. So 201 2/68 minus 28/40 is equal to 1/20th. Practice questions at 5. Calculate 5/2 plus 15/4 minus 21/8 and give your answers in its simplest form. 2. Calculate 5/2 minus 2/16 plus 1/4. Again, give your answer in the simplest form. Question 3. Anush and Martin complete a quiz. Anush gets 15/24 of the questions correct and Martin gets 84/96 right. What is the difference in the fractions of the questions they got right? You compare them. It's as simple as that. And there is your answer for question 1, question 2, and question 3 of practice questions set 5. Check. Celebrate if you got them all right. Do not despair if you didn't. Just check your answers, find out where you went wrong and make your corrections. And most importantly, learn from it. You learn from your mistakes. Finding fractions of something. You might need to calculate the fraction of something. In this case, of means times, multiply. So, whenever you see that, calculate half of 98. All you need to do is to multiply by dividing 98 by 2 times 1. Example 1. What is 1/32 of 14,656? Remember, of means times, so 1/32 of 14,656 is the same as 1/32 times 14,656. Don't get confused. A fraction is a division sum. However, because you have to multiply, you always divide by the bottom and you multiply by the top. If your calculator doesn't have a fraction button, you can type fractions by dividing the top by the bottom. So 1/32 is equal to 1 divided by 32. Once you've done that, you times that by 14,656 and you'll have 458. Section 3. Finding fractions of something. Example 2. A survey asked 32,820 people whether they are satisfied with their jobs. 7/12 of the people asked said no. How many people said no? You need to calculate 7/12 of 32,820. Remember, of means times. So 7/12 times 32,820 is equal to 19,145 people who said no, they are not satisfied. The signs of the times. And practice question set 6. A hair salon has 840 clients booked in for the month. 3/8 of the clients cancelled their appointments. How many clients cancelled? B. Of the remaining clients, 7/5 are booked in for a cut and color. How many clients are booked in for a cut and color? Question 3 is a typical level 2 question. So think carefully, make your notes, do your calculations systematically. And that is your answer. Question 1, 9,804. Question 2, 11,484. And question 3, 315, B, 245. Before we move on to summarize what we've done, let's look at the fraction wall. The top wall sits on top of 11 levels of blocks. At each level, the blocks are divided equally into bits. So you have the top block divided into two, which is 2 halves, and then you have thirds, fourths, fifths, sixths, sevenths, right down to 12ths. But they're all divided equally and they're put together so they're equal to the top block. So what can we learn from this? The fraction wall is very important because it helps you understand that fractions are parts of a whole by showing you how many smaller blocks at each layer add up to the length of the whole top block. They're all bits. If you look at the block carefully, you can add equivalent fractions, like at the top, 1/2 plus 1/2 is a whole. At the second layer, 1/3 plus 1/3 plus 1/3 is equal to 1, and so on, right down to the bottom bit, 12ths. 1/12 plus 1/12 plus 1/12 all add up to a whole, and you can see they are equivalent as you go through. So this is very, very important. Use the fraction wall to understand your fraction better. And finally, what have we learned? You now know that fractions is part of a whole. You know that a whole number and fraction together is a mixed number. You know that you must find a common factor, which means to convert to equivalent fraction, that enables you to compare fractions. You know that equivalent fractions also enable you to add or subtract fractions with different bottom numbers that we call denominators. You know the process of finding the common factor of different fractions. In other words, bringing the bottom numbers, making them the same. You know how to find a fraction of a whole number. And finally, you know how to use a calculator to work with fractions. And that is our lesson. I hope it's been useful to you. Please make sure you attend all the practice questions and then you check them. And of course, you do your corrections if you have to. I hope you find this lesson interesting because it's one of the lessons that you need to enable you to move forward with mathematics. Thank you for attending, and I'll see you next week.